Hello, and welcome to part 2 of our series, An Introduction to the Gospel of Mark. Today we will focus on the unique portrait of Jesus offered in this Gospel. Theologians call this Christology, or the study of why Christ did what he did, who Christ was, and how Christ saves. Before we begin, though, it is important to explore what is meant by Mark's Christology. Most of us have a composite view of Jesus Christ, an idea of Jesus in our minds that has been assembled from elements of all four Gospels, from Paul's letters, from the teachings of the church, from artwork we have seen, and from books that we have read. Often, that composite view is what is presented in movies and programs about Jesus, such as Jesus of Nazareth, or The Passion of the Christ. In this video, we will be exploring the unique Christology of Mark, as distinct from that of Matthew, Luke, John, or later church authors. This is important because, as we discussed in the first video, Mark and his congregation would not have had access to anybody else's view of Jesus. Mark presents a single, focused portrait of Jesus Christ, with his own emphases and his own perspective on what about Jesus' life, ministry, and death was important. By exploring Mark's Christology, we can uncover the unique contributions of this gospel and understand why Mark had such an influence over Matthew, Luke, and the entire early church. To explore this question, we will ask, who was Jesus for Mark? And specifically, how does Mark use the titles Christ, the Son of God, and the Son of Man? How are these titles related? The first and most obvious place to begin is with the very first line, Mark chapter 1, verse 1. This very first line presents two important titles for Jesus, Christ and the Son of God. Christ, of course, is not a surname, as in first name Jesus, last name Christ. Rather, Christ is a title. It comes from the Greek, Christos, which is a translation of the Hebrew Messiah, which means anointed one. In first century Palestine, Messiah was a loaded term. For many people in Judea, Messiah was a royal term, placing their hope in the covenant of David. At that time, Judea was being ruled by foreign occupiers, the Romans, who had their own gods and their own customs, which were enforced both by taxes and military force. Many Jews at the time hoped that the promised Son of David, meaning a descendant of the royal house, a king of the Jews, would come and deliver the people from the hands of their enemies. The terms Christ, Messiah, and Son of David all clearly tie Jesus to that expectation of deliverance from oppression. Mark, however, has a distinctly different idea of what it means to be the Christ. To explore Mark's vision of what it means to be the Messiah, let us turn to a pivotal passage. Mark chapter 8, verses 27 through 38. Please take a moment to pause the video and read through this passage carefully. Jesus asked the disciples first, "Who do people say that I am?" He then asks, "But who do you say that I am?" Mark is making a clear distinction between what popular opinion says and what the disciples know to be true. Peter answers, "You are the Messiah." It is important to note that we are almost exactly halfway through the Gospel of Mark, and that this is the first time since the opening title that the term Messiah has been used. The revelation of Jesus as Messiah is knowledge that has been made evident to Jesus' disciples, and by extension, to us as readers, but it is a secret which outsiders do not know. Mark, however, wants to clarify what exactly Jesus means by being the Christ. The proclamation of Jesus as Messiah is immediately followed by Jesus' first prediction of the Passion. This idea that the Christ must suffer is wildly opposed to the triumphant image of the Messiah that most first-century Jews would have believed in. This definition of Messiah is so disconcerting and so upsetting to the disciples that Peter took Jesus aside and began to rebuke him. Peter, as leader of the disciples, cannot accept that the Messiah, the anointed Son of David, could suffer and die. But Jesus in turn rebukes Peter and says, "Get behind me, Satan. You are thinking not as God does, but as human beings do." Mark proclaims Jesus as the Anointed One, but has a very different definition of what Christ, or Messiah, means. After this revelation at Caesarea Philippi, Mark will use the terms Messiah, Son of David, and the King of the Jews several more times. The majority of these uses, however, are found in Mark's Passion story. For Mark, it is crucially important that his readers understand that to be the Messiah means that the Christ must suffer and die upon the cross. The Son of God is another tricky term in Mark's Gospel. As noted before, the term Son of God is mentioned in the very first line, but even that is debated. Many of the earliest surviving manuscripts of Mark do not have the phrase Son of God in the title line. It was likely added by later editors. In the Gospel itself, the term Son of God is used 7 times. 2 of these times, the phrase is used by God the Father. Twice, demons, or those possessed by demons, use the term. 2 times, Jesus uses the term to refer to himself. The only time that an ordinary person uses the term is near the very end of the entire Gospel, when Jesus suffers on the cross for hours, and then finally gives up his spirit. Only then does the Roman centurion, a complete stranger who knows nothing else about Jesus, he says, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Like Mark's use of the term Messiah, the term Son of God is clearly tied to Jesus' suffering and death on the cross. For Mark, Jesus' divinity, his closeness to God the Father, is most clearly seen in his passion and death. Mark's most unique title for Jesus, however, is the enigmatic Son of Man. This title harkens back to the prophetic period of the Old Testament. In Ezekiel, God repeatedly asks the Son of Man to prophesy. Here, Son of Man probably just means human being. In the book of Daniel, however, the prophet sees a vision of one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. In Daniel, the vision is apocalyptic. That is, refers to the end of times, when God's judgment will come upon the earth. Apocalyptic literature became increasingly common in the last centuries before Christ, when the Jewish people were experiencing political and military oppression from their enemies. Daniel's vision of one like a son of man is accompanied by the 4 beasts of the apocalypse and other images of the end times. Both Ezekiel and Daniel were written in the later prophetic period, somewhere between 200 and 100 BC. Thus, the title Son of Man could have had both prophetic and apocalyptic overtones that were not necessarily associated with the Messiah or the restoration of the Davidic kingdom. This is the term, however, which Jesus most often uses to refer to himself in this gospel. It is used exclusively when Jesus predicts his passion and death upon the cross. In this manner, Son of Man cannot be seen as a prophetic title, wherein Jesus is foretelling both the events of his passion as well as their meaning. Son of Man is also used in an apocalyptic sense. In chapter 8, for instance, Jesus warns, "Whoever is ashamed of me and of my words in this faithless and sinful generation, the Son of Man will be ashamed of when he comes in his Father's glory with his holy angels." This apocalyptic vision is reinforced in chapter 13, when Mark directly quotes from the book of Daniel. After warning his disciples about false messiahs, Jesus says that the true Messiah will come, and all will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, and then he will send out his angels and gather his elect from the four winds, from the ends of the earth, and from the end of the sky. Here Mark's theology is evident. In both chapter 8 and chapter 13, Mark links the title of Messiah directly with the title Son of Man, and connects both powerful ideas with the person of Jesus. Mark expressly transforms the triumphant images of Messiah and Son of Man with the person who suffered and died upon the cross. But Mark's Christology makes another important step. In chapter 8, Mark also directly connects the title Son of Man with God the Father. Thus, the Son of Man is also the Son of God. Mark creates a Trinitarian vision of the Christ, one who comes from the power and glory of the Father, but who is inspired by the spirit of prophecy, and is also a human Messiah who freely suffers to deliver his people. We will discuss Mark's depiction of the humanity of Jesus in the next video. For now, however, it is good to note that Mark makes an important theological assertion by linking the titles Son of God, Son of Man, and Messiah into the single person of Jesus. Moreover, these titles are associated with divine authority, the power to forgive sins, the power to minister during the Sabbath, and the power to offer oneself as a sacrifice for many. Mark makes the transformative assertion that Jesus has taken priestly and even godly authority upon himself. Mark's Christology becomes foundational to all future arguments for Jesus' relationship with God. Today we have explored Mark's complex Christology and found a Jesus who is simultaneously a Davidic Messiah, a powerful Son of God, and a prophetic Son of Man. And all three identities are intrinsic for Mark's vision of what it means to be the Christ. Today we examined the divinity of Jesus, but in part 3 we'll examine the humanity of Jesus. We will ask, how human is Jesus? Why is there no Christmas story or genealogy? How does Jesus use his touch to heal? And is Jesus a magic man? Thank you for joining me today. I hope to see you next time as we continue this introduction to the Gospel of Mark.